Hi, I'm David Ake with AP Photos. The big story in Washington this week was the AIG bonuses and the resulting outrage. This gives me an opportunity to do something a little different and break down how we cover a single big assignment. So for this week in Washington Photos, I give you the AIG hearing. Wednesday's hearing, where AIG CEO Edward Liddy faced Congress, was huge. People lined up early for a seat. J. Scott Applewhite found a very clever way to illustrate that, taking advantage of Liddy's picture in the paper. Hearings this high profile are crowded. To show that, a high angle is helpful, but there is no balcony in this hearing room, and bringing in a ladder just isn't practical. So to make this picture of Liddy's arrival, Pablo Martinez Monsivais used a rig where he puts his camera on a monopod, extends it over his head, and trips the camera with a remote shutter release. Our photographer in the center of that crowd was Susan Walsh. She starts off with this photo of Edward Liddy looking over at protesters as he arrives in the hearing room. Because it's so crowded, Susan can't easily move, so she has to rely on different lensing to make up for the lack of movement. Here she uses a medium telephoto to make Liddy looking over his glasses before starting his testimony. But first, Congressman Barney Frank has some opening questions. Because it's so tough to move and switch lenses, Susan actually shot this much looser from across the room, relying on the editor to crop it up. With her wide-angle lens, Susan made this image showing the grandeur of the hearing room. And from the same seated position, Susan also used her telephoto lens and a very shallow depth of field for this portrait that captures the strain in Liddy's eyes. Still sitting in the same spot, Susan shot this medium view with a bit of a twist by getting lower than the tabletop and tilting the frame just a bit. When committee chairman Paul Kanjorski started getting tough with the protesters in the audience, Susan swung around to make this frame of the congressman sitting directly behind her. Pablo Monsivais was working the edges of the hearing, so he had some freedom of movement. He was able to get behind Liddy and make this photo of Congressman Carolyn Maloney asking questions. After a very long day of testimony, Pablo made this telling frame of a tired-looking Liddy leaving the room. On the Washington Photo Desk, I'm David Ake, Associated Press.